Namaste. Can I have my slides back up, please? So I work for Google, and Google was founded 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, this was the world headquarters of Google. This garage here, or what we call car shed, was where Google was founded in Menlo Park, California. And if you had opened that car shed door and walked in, this is what you'd have seen. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, sitting at what was the engineering center, the development office, sales office, all rolled into one. And their ambition at the time, the mission was to organize all of the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. In a sense, they were also trying to come up with this concept of join or union, to join all of humanity with all of publicly available information and thereby be useful, make it useful and productive in their lives. And back then, this was their only and first product, a simple web page, pretty ugly by today's standards, and it could do only one thing, which is you type in a word, it would give you a list of web pages that had the word in that. And fast forward 20 years later, the modern incarnation of, that same web page looks like this, and now this is used in 200 countries and territories in 120 different languages, and a typical month it's used about 150 billion times. That's roughly 75 times for every human being on the internet. And it does pretty amazing things, and we've all taken it for granted, but if I were to just give you a little demo of it, without even thinking too much about it, we pull out these kind of devices, the deck of a size of playing cards, and are able to have real conversations with it. Okay, Google, what is yoga?
According to Wikipedia, yoga is a group of physical, mental, and spiritual practices or disciplines which originated in ancient India.
Okay, Google, where can I study it?
I found a few places within 18.3 kilometers.
And among other places, it says Iyengar Yoga, Yoga Shema, and several others. And what he just witnessed is a pretty incredible act of computer science in that this device understands human language and speech and context. When I said, where can I study it, without even specifying what exactly do I want to study, it sort of knows from the context that I'm still in the conversation. All that is well and good, and we can say that they've accomplished tremendous things with that mission and vision that they had. Now, 2,600 years ago, in this land, another great movement started, what we now know as yoga, and its purpose was also union of that individual self with a larger sense of what we would call consciousness. And every week, those two things collide. This 20-year organization, Google, and this 2,600-year-old tradition comes together every week on the Google campus in scenes like this. It's a movement, it's a program, it's a yoga program for Googlers that I founded 13 years ago when I joined the company. It's called Yoglers, the yoga program for Googlers. And it happens all over the world. It has become one of the largest yoga programs in the world. There are 250 classes every single week, 250. But it started with one class that I did because one particular product manager, Matt Kovinsky, kept persistently insisting that I teach him yoga once he found out that I was a yoga instructor. And what started with one student in one conference room has spread to be this 250 classes a week program, and it unfolds every week. And in my estimate, about 8,000 Googlers or so practice on a pretty regular basis. And it didn't happen all of a sudden. It took a lot of work over the 13 years. It's driven by a large group of volunteers who treat this as their karma yoga, their act of service, to grow this movement within this company, and it spread from office to office. In fact, this caught the attention of the Ministry of External Affairs as to why is this internet company embracing this ancient tradition. And 2 years ago, for the 70th anniversary of India's independence, they produced a documentary called India Boundless, and for that documentary, they actually did a small snippet of the Yoglers yoga program at Google. Can we have that documentary, please? Let me give it a second while it's coming up.
We're heading to Silicon Valley in California, home to some of the largest tech corporations in the world. At the Googleplex, the corporate headquarters of the internet search engine giant, we connect with Gopi Kallayil. Gopi is a hardcore technology evangelist at Google.
We work in fairly demanding jobs, and much of what happens around the Googleplex is really innovating and solving some big problems out there using technology at scale, using real computer science and using massive data at scale. But in the midst of all of this, the most important technology that we all have access to, all 7.1 billion people, is right here. I call it our inner net, which is our body, our mind, our breath, our consciousness.
Drawing from his Indian roots, Gopi instituted Yoglas, a yoga and meditation program for Google employees worldwide. So while Google is helping the world to connect on the outside, the power of this great Indian internet helps Googlers to reconnect within.
And it's a fairly large, widespread global program. There are hundreds of people involved. And there's an acknowledgement that a program like yoga, for example, that the original teachings come out of an Indian tradition and Indian heritage. I mean, it's a living science that has evolved in many different directions, along with other streams of meditation mindfulness that have emerged in other parts of the world.
While technology giants worldwide are acquiring the Indian science of...
So the question, back to the slides, please. So the question is often asked, why drives this level of interest among the tech community, among Googlers, to take up this ancient 2,600-year-old practice? And in my opinion, there are two primary reasons. The first is Googlers as a group understand that they thrive on ideas and innovation. It is like oxygen for the company. And ideas and innovation comes from this asset, from our body, from our brain, from our imagination, from our creativity. And Googlers intuitively have understood that these practices help put this asset, I call the inner net, into a state of peak performance. The second is, again, Googlers is a practical, rational group of people, like tools, like, I call it settings. It's sort of like on your phone, you can do various settings and you can configure your app and optimize this device for your personal preference. In a similar way, as Mr. Nagendra was explaining, yoga allows you to do these settings. The fact that it's a simple, portable practice that allows you to manage your internal settings. The fact that you can change your physical state, your emotional state, your mental state with just using your body, your breath, movement, attention, and intention, and all you need is your body on a blue yoga mat, as far as the Hatha Yoga practice is concerned. The Googlers found it very appealing, and the fact that they can take 45 minutes at the end of a day and quickly change their states was something that seems to have appealed to a lot of people. But a while ago, I started thinking that all of this is still primarily asana practice, and as Mr. Nagendra was explaining, that this is a vast roving philosophy, and I wanted to expose Googlers to the other aspects of yoga as well. I wanted them to get a taste of the four main paths of yoga: Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Karma Yoga. So I started organizing retreats from them in traditional yoga settings, primarily ashram settings, where yoga was originally practiced and developed. So I started taking yogas to traditional Indian ashrams, and the one I picked was the Shivananda ashram, because I learned in that particular tradition. And there are several around the US established by Swami Vishnudevananda, one of the great yoga masters to come out of India, who took yoga to the West as well. So let me show you a couple of pictures. Can we have the slides back up? So this is one of the retreats we did at the Shivananda ashram in the Bahamas. Since it's close to us in the Caribbean. And this ashram follows a traditional Indian yoga setting. It's run by, as traditionally as any Shivananda ashram in India would. And if you stay there for a few days, you get exposed to all the four main paths of yoga. And every year or so, we take groups of Googlers and go on these retreats where they get a taste of the other dimensions of yoga besides just asana practice. And these are some pictures here. Here the group is posing on the yoga deck on the ocean in Vrikshasana, or in Ekapada Hastas, and obviously they're having a lot of fun with it. And when we do these things together outside of a work context, it's a great way for team building in general and camaraderie. And these Googlers come from all over the world, from the London office, Toronto office, Mexico City, etc., and leading to obviously a state of joy and fun and bliss, the ultimate purpose of yoga. So all of this is well and good, but I started asking the question, can we then push the boundaries and go past just simply asana practice or meditation, the two streams that seems to have caught the imagination of the West? And those come from the Raja Yoga path, and arguably, at least in my opinion, the hardest of the four paths of yoga. For me personally, Bhakti Yoga is the one that gives me the most joy and the most rasa, especially kirtan practice. And I started asking myself, can we actually have kirtan at Google? And why not? At Google, we are raised with the sense of the possible. You never take no for an answer. So I decided to go big with it and ask the biggest name in kirtan music in the West, a gentleman called Krishna Das. And Krishna Das was born Jeffrey Kegel into a Jewish family. He was a rock musician. And like many of the young people of his generation, came to India seeking answers. And he became a disciple of Neem Karoli Baba in Kenchi, and eventually became the priest at the Kali temple in Kenchi. And when he went back to the US, he became a kirtan musician. Started off in a small way, now he's a big name, pulls in thousands of people at his concerts. And 3 years ago, his album, Live Ananda, was one of the nominees for the Grammy in the New Age category. So I asked Krishna Das, and I have no money to pay him because his charge is quite big. And he agreed to do it. He said yes, and he said he'd do it for free. So we organized a kirtan at Google, and just 100 meters or so from where CEO Sundar Pichai sits, in the middle of the day, this scene unfolded. Dozens of Googlers leaving their desks, whatever project they're working on. They might have been working on trying to optimize Google Maps or self-driving car, and here's what unfolded. Can we have the second video, please? All right, as you can see, Googlers enjoying themselves and jamming away for kirtan, and it looks just as joyful as any that you might find in a place like Vrindavan. So we're continuing to grow and build the moment, and for 2019, one of the goals I have, along with my Yogler ambassadors, is a goal called 100% yoga. And what we mean by that is Google, every quarter you set yourself targets and you publicly declare it. So one of the targets I've set for myself and this team of volunteers is to bring 100% yoga to every single Google office. So what we're trying to do is, if you work at Google, any office anywhere in the world above a certain size, 50 people is how we defined it, you'll have access to at least one free yoga class every week. And we are at 80% of that target now. In 2019, we hope to actually hit that 100% target. And we committed to the company we would do it at $0. We won't ask for any budget. We'll just be scrappy. So a lot of it is done by Googlers themselves who become yoga instructors, lead this practice, and in innovative ways we started doing it. So the 100% yoga in every single office, major office around the world, is our goal for 2019. I want to close this off by telling you about what is my dream and vision behind yoga, much larger than giving a lot of Googlers access to this incredible practice that I've benefited from pretty much my entire life, from the age of 19 when I ran away to an ashram to go live and study yoga and become a yoga teacher myself. So I've had the privilege of working at Google now for 13 years. And it's been a privilege because I've found great meaning and context in the work that I do. With the simple fact that every single day I feel the work I do or what my colleagues do actually touches the lives of hundreds of millions of people in a positive way. That we are connecting humanity with publicly available information with the intent that this information will then be useful to all of you for education, for entertainment, for enlightenment. And I want to tell you a personal story of how deeply I feel connected with this sense of purpose. And for that, I want to take you on a journey to a small rice farming village called Chittilanjeri. It's in Kerala in southern India. And this is where my roots go back to. And I'll be there actually tomorrow. I'm flying there back to that area. And this is where my grandparents lived as poor rice farmers. They were marginal subsistence farmers, cultivating a plot of land not much bigger than what this hotel occupies. This is where my parents grew up as the children of two poor rice farming families, and they had a very, very modest life. They grew up without electricity. They grew up without running water. They don't have a college education. The only education they got was 10 years of schooling in a rural Indian village school, so modest at best. But they had aspirations for their 4 children, just like parents anywhere in the world will have. And thanks to those aspirations, their 4 children, that is me and my 3 siblings, we went on to get 10 college degrees, advanced degrees, including 2 from US Ivy League business schools, even though my parents had never set foot in America. So the question is often asked, what caused that kind of social mobility in one generation? It is very simply access to information. But when I was growing up, it was very slow access. For example, when I wanted to come up with a list of graduate schools that I wanted to apply to, I remember taking an 8-hour train journey from my college in Tiruchirappalli all the way to Chennai, 8-hour train journey, so that I could look at a physical copy of the US World News Guide to Graduate Schools at the USIS library. Today, of course, 8 seconds feels too long on our phone. But we still got access to that information, and that's what propelled the family forward. Today, when I go back to the village and look at the village school where my mother studied, infrastructure-wise, it still looks pretty much the same, except for one difference. And this is a story unfolding not just in Chittilanjeri, our village, but also tens of thousands of villages all over the world. And that is children with access to the internet and with the kind of technologies we're building at Google now have access to the same amount of information as somebody who goes to the Indian Institute of Technology, as somebody who's enrolled at the University of Oklahoma. So in an era where information is like oxygen, we are leveling the playing field for humanity. And in a sense, I treat this as my karma yoga because we have connected the 3.2 billion people who are on the internet with all publicly available information that is available for free, whether it's a TED Talk or a National Geographic video or just a Wikipedia entry on yoga that you might be interested in. So this is all amazing, and it's great that we made this kind of progress. But there's a larger vision and intent I have around yoga, and that is, in the midst of all this, we still live in a world of a lot of divisiveness. There is that sense of separation, that sense of the other, and that creates competition, that creates conflict, that creates confrontation. And it is my hope that as yoga spreads around the world and comes out of a traditional context in India, out of an ashram-like setting, and enters the world of, say, corporate sectors, whether it's Google or any other company, or all of the initiatives that Mr. Nagendra talked about as yoga continues to spread, that through the practice, all of the practitioners will find a true sense of union, a sense of that connection, that sense of that cooperation, that sense of community, so that when we actually sit at the end of a yoga class and say, Lokaha samastaha sukhino bhavantu, Om Shanti, 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 it is no longer just a dream or an aspiration, but it's actually a true realization of our state of being. This is my hope for where yoga will take us all, and this will be our greatest gift to mankind. Namaste.